Welcome to Your Best Life podcast, where we help you discover your calling so you can live with purpose and clarity. We're Pete and Julie Morrill, your guides, mentors, and lifelong adventurers, and we're here to help you find your true north.
All right, well, this morning we are doing a unique coaching session, and that is with my wife and the co-founder of Quest, Julie Morrill. And if we're honest about where we're at right now, Julie, this is not a real comfortable place for you to be. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, why is that? Why don't you tell them why that is?
First of all, I like being behind the camera and doing the production side of things more than being on camera. Part of it is I'm actually pretty shy, so it's weird for me to even do a podcast at all, especially a video podcast. I think if it were just audio, I could kind of handle it a little bit better. I'm also not great at public speaking. I actually hate it. So I can teach, I think I've mentioned it in other episodes, that I can teach a small group or maybe a maximum of 30 people, because that's what I'm used to in a classroom setting as a teacher. But you are a public speaker, so I feel a little bit intimidated by you, and also the material of True North Quests is your deal. You've done it for so many years under different names with college staff or college age staff and 20-somethings at Kidder Creek Camp, and even with your youth group, probably high school groups. I mean, on and on. You've done it for years, and I've just been supporting you and saying, oh, that's a really good job, you know, it's good stuff. But have I ever gone through it all myself? Not exactly. Even though I'm helping to write like some of the material and the manual, it's different when the focus is on me. But I also feel like if I don't do this, how can I expect you guys to do this, you know? I'm nervous about it. How would I expect, how can I ask everybody, you know, come on and be on our podcast and we'll coach you, unless I've done it, you know? I've been in this seat, so
yeah,
I got to get over this.
Yeah, it's challenging having the microscope on you, especially on your personality and your dreams and your ambitions and all of that sort of stuff. So let me give you a few kind of principles that will maybe help things go more smoothly. We have a process, but the goals are you understanding you better. So that goal is the priority. So anytime that the process gets in the way of that, you need to stop, and we need to slow down, and we need to dig deeper on whatever. Probably, knowing you're going to want to move the process through quickly, and I'm going to sit on this or that, and that might get emotional at times, or that might be hard. That's what the coaching part is about. The process, anybody could do by themselves. But the coaching part is listening for in between the cracks. At times it's going to seem awkward because the conversation is going to be centered on you. And I know you well enough to know that that's not the kind of conversation you normally have with people. You ask a lot of questions, you engage them a lot. And almost everybody feels self-conscious when there's too much about them. But that's really what this requires, is that we talk largely about you. Third is other people are listening. Now you can doctor this, you know, you can edit things out and all that sort of stuff. But try to talk as if you're talking to just one person rather than 30 or 100 or however many people. It's a podcast, and podcasts are an option. We don't ever have to put it on if something comes up.
I can delete the whole thing if I don't like it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Finally, not a lot will surprise you, because I've asked the questions of Julie, and generally when I do coaching, I don't want people to be surprised by the general direction, but I'm going to ask deeper questions when I feel like it's going to be enlightening. And maybe it won't be enlightening and I'll move on, and maybe it will be enlightening and I'll ask 3 deeper questions. So I always tell people not a lot is going to surprise you, but the deeper part will probably surprise you. And I don't ask the questions flippantly just because I want to get off script, but I ask them because I feel like there's a prompting that might be important to understand as we go. But the first question I'm going to ask, and I ask everybody, is, well, why do you want to go through a life calling process? Why do you want to go through a life coaching process?
So I did my homework that
Yeah.
you gave me. So I have some degree of understanding. I have some degree of understanding of my life calling. I just don't know exactly how to fulfill it. So I think that's partly why I'd like to be coached by you. I also want to understand this whole process better from the client's perspective rather than coaches. So, and I've done coaching, but not entirely in your process. So I want to understand your process.
Well, I have never done coaching through this process with lots of people before. I've used a slightly different, and this process has morphed a good bit. So even you being my life partner at times have seen it, but you've never done it at this deep of level, and maybe this kind of scientific level.
I also kind of want to know, honestly, what my role and value are to True North Quests and even our podcast. I have an idea, but I want to go maybe a little deeper in understanding what am I here for exactly.
Yeah, well, it's just a reality that we all are constantly in different settings, right? And True North Quest is kind of a different role for us. And as we're moving forward, you and I are trying to figure out, okay, how does this work together, the two of us? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So why do you want to find your life calling? What's the essence of that desire?
I feel like it's purpose in life. I want my life to have value. I want to bless other people in a way that fulfills me and maybe leaves a legacy as well, even if it's a small part. I'm sorry, I knew I was going to get emotional. Sorry.
That's all right.
I told you this
was okay.
Hard. I have my tissue box, but
this wasn't the most emotional question.
But. So honestly, I've had a lot of regrets in life about times when I wasn't fulfilling my calling, and I knew I wasn't. I just didn't know what it was, and it's just been in the last maybe 5 years that I really have figured out, oh, I know what my calling is, but even from then till now, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to fulfill it. But even in this process, I'm so sorry. It's emotional going through your life story and sharing it, even when I know it's my own husband as the coach. And you're very compassionate and caring, but there have been some really hard times in my life where I've made really bad decisions. And I wish I had had a coach during those times. I had mentors, really godly women in my life, but not always at the times that I really needed them, like they came in and out of my life or something. And boy, did I make some bad decisions at critical times in my life. And I wish I had a coach.
Well, and maybe it's a good time to kind of say there's a difference between friends and therapists and coaches. Friends are people that come alongside you, right? And they're going to journey with you in a process. A therapist is maybe going to go and look backwards into your life story, and they're going to try to unpack some of the hurts and the wounds, and they're going to try to unpack why that maybe affects the way that you look at life. And a coach is generally going to take who are you and move forward. At least that's the emphasis of our coaching process. And those are very simplistic terms. And somebody could be all three of those, but it's pretty rare. For most people, they have a therapist, perhaps, that's going to help them unpack some things. Some people have friends that are really good at helping you unpack things. And then coaches are kind of helping you kind of get a compass that moves you forward now that you know who you are. What are the fears? Some of these have already come up, right? What are the fears that you have that are related to this life calling thing?
To life calling or this coaching
The
process?
coaching process and the life calling.
One of my biggest fears was crying on camera, and I already did it, so I guess who cares?
We're done with that one now. Check that one off. Okay.
What are my fears? I guess just being vulnerable. This is hard.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, this is hard. I told you all morning I've been really emotional about this, and I wasn't really sure what was going on, and I think being vulnerable with you has just been a real blessing over our marriage. But sharing even that with the world is a little bit hard.
Yeah. But you're not the only one that's going to feel this way, right? And I think that's kind of why you're willing to power through it. Not everybody's going to have to be on a podcast, nor does this even have to be on a podcast. But I think you're willing to power through it because, one, at the end, you know that you're going to have something valuable. I think that's why you're invested in it. But two is people can relate to this, right? There's going to be other times where they see a Julie that looks together and feels together.
This is a little different.
And then they're going to see now when it's the spotlight is on you, that's a pretty uncomfortable place for you. Let's go theological. If God designs you, and this is just kind of a little bit of how do you see things? Does God design one path or one life calling for you, or does he design multiple paths?
So I wrote this down.
That's okay. Julie, just so you know, everybody probably will figure this out eventually, but she's a note taker. She doesn't like to think extraneously without being able to write. And so when she has questions in front of her, she almost has to write out the answer to think it through well.
Yeah, blubbery mess right now.
No, you're fine.
So I do believe there are multiple paths for people that they could choose from, but I think in my life, that's been part of the problem. Too many options, too many paths, and really praying a lot through most of my life, like which path do I choose? This is part of the regret, maybe. I don't know. I was offered so many things in my life that even looking back, I'm shocked by. I was actually offered a job without even looking at it for it at World Vision one time. I don't even know if I've told you that. Another one was Peace Corps. It's not super hard to get into the Peace Corps, actually. The church that I was going to during college at UCLA offered to send me to seminary to become a pastor, a reverend, actually. That just blew my mind. I just didn't know how to deal with that.
And here's what I think is sometimes too many opportunities is just as confusing as too few. And so I've coached a number of college students, and I say, as valuable as anything is to eliminate opportunities. And sometimes I think you need to step one or two steps into an opportunity before you know this opportunity is not my life calling. Or this is very close to my life calling, but it's just it's not taking advantage. It's not the right environment to take advantage of the strengths that I bring. What part do you think your faith plays in discovering your life calling, and why is that?
It's so much part of who I am that I don't think I could ever separate it from my life calling. I think my relationship with God is so kind of matter of fact. I just tell God everything all the time in my head. I'm just talk. My problem is being quiet enough to really listen to God once in a while. A lot of the things that have happened in my life have been church related or ministry related. Even meeting you, and you were the director of a Christian camp. It just fit that. Of course, why wouldn't I marry somebody in ministry? That made total sense. And I think I just fit in there pretty easily, fit with you pretty easily because of that. You and I were raised in a similar way, and our faith was so similar that made it easy. Sorry, I'm off on a little tangent.
Yeah, it's not why you picked your partner. But this is a harder question. And when we tell people we're going to coach them in their life calling, we never expect, and it's not true of me and it's not true of you, that 100% of our life is aligned perfectly with your life calling. But that would be great if it ever happened. That's kind of the aspiration. But I think people that are very, very aligned maybe have 70 or 80% of their life. What they're doing right now is aligned with who they are at the essence. Where would you say you're at right at this moment?
This is also kind of hard, but kind of good. I think even 5 years ago it was maybe 5%, and now we're up to about 40.
Okay.
So I feel like I'm heading in the right direction because knowing what I'm called to do to some degree really helped me push forward in that more. And even if it was just 5 minutes a day, I was like, I'm going to work on something related to True North Quest and pushing forward with that. And literally for maybe a year, it was 5 minutes a day. But it fulfilled me. Even that little bit was like, I know this is our path. I know I'm on the right track. I got to keep going toward that. And that expanded a little bit more each day until I feel like, okay, we're up to 40%.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually pretty fulfilled.
And that's the nice thing about life calling is total alignment isn't necessary. In fact, very few people are going to have, very few people are probably going to have 60 or 70%, right? So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to get people where it aligns, their strengths are played into their world every time. The strengths of their personality, the strengths of their skills, the strength of their story, the strength of all of those things come somewhat in alignment about 40% of their working time. And that's where you feel like you're at. Obviously, the more you can move that compass further down, the better.
Well, part of it is I still work. For you, you're my boss too. And there's just everyday work and life to take care of. I don't have time to devote even 60, 70, 80, 90% to our calling,
Well, and we're just talking about this concept more and more, but roles and responsibilities are something that compete with sometimes we have roles that take us away from our calling. And that doesn't mean that role is wrong, because sometimes that role is serving a very important purpose, perhaps raising kids, perhaps making money, perhaps caring for elderly parents or people in a difficult situation. So we've used the acronym QUEST. We kind of patented this acronym, at least as far as we know, at least as attached to these worlds. And we ask people to memorize it. Why do you think we ask people to memorize it?
Every letter in the acronym?
Mm-hmm.
I think because it shows you the path you're on and what's coming next in the process and where I've come from and the whole package. Am I answering that?
Kind of. Yes, it shows you the next step. But really what I want people to do as a result of being involved with our Quest program is, am I clear on the three big questions? Do I know what my unique story is telling me? Do I know what my emotional grid is calling me to? Do I understand that I really want to use my skills and abilities? Am I aligning my life calling with my true heart passion? And am I designing my life to be a selfless gift for other people around? I don't want them to go through this program and not be able to identify what is it in their unique story, what is it in their emotional grid, what is it in there. Because if we're giving you a compass, the compass isn't just for these sessions. The compass is for the rest of your life. And the more we can get you to define, so we want you to know the acronyms, but we want you to assign certain characteristics, skills, certain discoveries with those acronyms that are unique to you, right? But what are the three questions that we're asking everybody?
Who am I? What is my calling? And what difference will it make?
Okay. And what do you think is the hardest of those three questions?
They all can be hard.
They all can be hard, but
if you don't know who you are,
that's the foundational one, right? And that's where we spend the majority of our time, right? And that's where this coaching comes in, is we want you to discover who you are. But we could send you through a program to discover who you are with no coaching. And so the challenge becomes not a life calling statement is a very short statement that should remind you on a regular basis why are you here on planet Earth, right? And I think that the more people know their life calling statement, the more they'll lift it up to reality and say, is this really true of who I am today, in my schedule today? Does it represent my bank account? Does it represent the things that I am acting towards? And how much of that? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 30% of those things? So the compass isn't valuable unless the compass is in your hand or your head. And we want you to memorize it so the compass is in your head. So at the end of this time, I'm going to ask you, okay, what are 5 or 6 things that are true of your unique story that need to be in that my unique story? And so I can say my unique story tells me that I do best when I'm in the outdoors, when I'm leading team in an adventure or a personal discovery process. Well, what we want you to do is we want you to have a very short sentence about your unique story as a result of our coaching time. So we grab the things in your unique story that really are fulfilling to you. So the process we ask you to go through when you're doing your life story is we ask you to catalog basically the periods of your time that you did and what were the things that were most fulfilling. And you said there was some redundancy in yours. What was that redundancy? What are the things that showed up multiple times?
I did notice a trend of some of them were obvious, like writing. I was always not riding horses, but writing.
Written word.
I have had people misunderstand me when I said, I've been riding a lot lately. I'm like, oh, cool, you're out horseback riding.
We live where some people are horseback riders, and we had horses in our backyard for much of our marriage.
So, yeah, a lot of writing, but a lot of international related things. Mm-hmm. Even in my childhood, I was hanging out with missionaries from church, which I don't think was very common.
Probably the kids hanging out with those people.
It was kind of weird because I didn't think it was weird. I just thought they were fascinating. I was reading books about missionaries. We had friends that moved. I didn't know them really well, but they moved to Australia and they would send us things from Australia and books from Australia about the animals. And I was like, I want to go to Australia. Still have never been. But.
And almost every week you come up with a new place that you want to discover. And you're either going to make a menu item based on that place, or we're going to watch 5 or 6 videos, YouTube videos on that place.
This has been throughout my entire life.
Right.
I mean, this is a theme of international travel or learning about other cultures or hanging out with international people. And even when I was in college, I was volunteering for international student clubs and helping them assimilate into American culture. Just helping refugees even. I did that when I lived in Sacramento, a little bit in LA. I just can't seem to get away from international people and culture and travel.
Yep. So when we ask somebody to do their life story, what we do is we ask them to talk about a period of time in their life, whether it's your grade school years, or maybe your high school years, or maybe your college years, your early professional years, your later professional years. And during that time, we want them to pick 1 or 2 or 3 chapters. And a chapter could be, for example, for me, I was the co-editor of our school paper. And so that's a chapter in my high school years, right? And during that time, I write what were the verbs that were most fulfilling to me in that chapter. And writing was one of them, but organizing and leading and creatively compiling the stories into a format that became our school paper. I was one of the co-editors. And so those are things that we highlight, right? So in your discovery of the chapters, we then asked ChatGPT to look at those multiple layers of chapters all throughout your life. And we ask it to give you 10 observations about what you can learn from your life history about your life calling. And then we gave you the assignment of the 10 that ChatGPT gave us, what are the 3 that just kind of jumped out at you? Maybe there's more than 3, maybe there's less than 3. But what are the 3 that you found were most significant?
I chose spiritual depth was the first one.
Okay.
Next was mentoring, and the third was teaching and storytelling.
So you're probably choosing out of, because what it did is it gave you a longer sentence, right? Now you're saying, okay, these showed up kind of multiple times throughout your, throughout your observations. And so was that aha, or was that a kind of a no-brainer?
So, interestingly, the spiritual depth was the aha.
Okay.
It's just so much who I am. I just never thought of writing it down as
Gotcha.
part of my story. Why I wouldn't even think of that. It's just
Gotcha.
everything I did.
Because your culture was so familiar to you, your spiritual upbringing, your kind of spiritual learning now was so familiar to you that you didn't see it as something that you really focused on, right? Yeah. So that was an aha that, oh, that is important to me. And it should have been obvious to me, but it wasn't, right? And that one of the things I like about using ChatGPT or any AI is it's not me and it's not you that's making these observations. It's kind of an inanimate object and now we can punch them up, right? We can say, oh, this is really true. And why do you think you didn't notice that?
Well, I think it's stating the obvious. It's like, of course. But then it made me really think, wait a second, maybe there's more that I should explore there.
Don't you think there are people that have gone to church all their life that their faith isn't a big part of their life calling?
Oh, sure.
Right.
And it doesn't
Lots
have
of
to
them,
be. It doesn't
right?
have to be at all.
Right.
I just didn't think it could be part of my life calling. That's just who I am. So I don't know. I just didn't.
Yeah.
No.
Which is one of the reasons we go through this process, is so you can start to see the obvious overlap. What were the other 2?
Mentoring.
Okay. And now tell us, because this is one of the nice things that chat does, is it not only says you've been a mentor, but it reminds you of the things that you wrote down, and it says, remember when you mentored here in maybe even in grade school, and then you were mentoring in high school, and then you were mentoring, and it lists those 4 or 5 things kind of in a bullet point of, oh, here's where your mentoring showed up. Did it do that for you? Yeah, go ahead.
It says mentoring. She, Julie, is called to nurture and guide others through her hospitality, mentoring, and spiritual motherhood. With deep care and investment in the growth of others, she creates safe, nurturing environments where people can heal, grow, and discover their identity and purpose. Well, I just thought I was helping people discover their identity and purpose. I didn't know it was all that, and I think, wow, that kind of describes me pretty well.
The other thing it does is it elevates it, right? Doesn't
it elevates me more than I want to be elevated.
Well, and that's the reality of life calling,
Mhm.
is it elevates who you are, where the things are fairly common to you. We're going to do a coaching session or an interview, not a coaching session, with a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a 9 out of 10 in terms of being a mom.
Or a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, maybe a 10 out of 10. And we just did a pre-interview with her. And I think she felt elevated by that interview. But then she also said to us, she kind of needs to show women how being a mom is really fun, because you can constantly be learning yourself as well as imparting in your kids. And so what we in our pre-interview did is we elevated her calling, right? And that's what ChatGPT, I mean, that's the crazy thing is, this inanimate thing says, wow, you're really good at this, and you're really good at this. It's obviously telling you, look at all the ways that you have mentored.
Yeah, it was actually very encouraging and made me emotional.
Do you use the word mentor to describe yourself much? No, right? But ChatGPT is saying,
maybe you should.
This is what mentoring looks like, and you've been doing it all throughout your life, probably even in grade school. And one of the things I like about Unique Story is the things that we do in grade school are usually the things that we do that are less trying to impress people and more who we naturally are. Because we're not trying, we are starting to try, but we're not trying to get a grade or always to please our parents or to impress our friends or to impress our neighbors. We're just living truly who we are. And so a lot of those glimmers show up even in grade school children. So I think it's somewhat helpful to look at that. What was the third one?
Teaching and storytelling. That part was not surprising.
Very obvious to anybody that knows you and knows your situation. But why is it important for you to know that it's shown up multiple times, or be reminded that it's shown up multiple times? It's got to be part of your life calling, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be in there. That was the most obvious one. The most obvious ones are the ones that we've got to make sure we do not bury.
Okay, so I'm called to help others understand their calling. I know that's at least part of my calling. But when I see that my spiritual life is important to that, I feel like, wow, that's really elevated and valued. That's really awesome. Sorry. Next, mentoring. Okay, obviously, that's part of coaching. It fits really well. But the fact that I can be, sorry,
it's okay.
I'm a spiritual mother to people, that was really encouraging to me too.
So that term might not make sense to a lot of people. What does that mean to you? And was that a term that you used, or ChatGPT came up with? Yeah, interesting. But what does it mean to you, and why does it bring tears to your eyes?
I think because I really enjoyed being a mom to our kids. That part was really great. But I've always had women in my life. I think they were usually younger, but not always. Sometimes my peers. And spiritually, I would be encouraging them and maybe doing Bible studies with them or something, where I would just form a small, sometimes only 3 of us in a Bible study. So I look back at that and think, there's something actually of value to that. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and you've also had spiritual mentors, mothers.
Very valuable to me.
Yeah.
Very
in fact,
valuable.
you just spoke with one on the phone yesterday or the day before.
I don't know how I would survive without my spiritual mothers. So to think that I could be one is, sorry, kind of amazing.
And the interesting thing is, your own mother, who is a very strong spiritual woman, and a very formative part, very positive, formative part on your life, probably isn't your number one spiritual mother. And which is interesting to me because she is well positioned to be that, but you needed somebody that could look more objectively, perhaps, yeah, in terms of you, and maybe didn't have the obligation, perhaps, to mother you, but did it out of their own heart. Yeah. Anything else out of the 10 observations that just kind of jumped out at you?
I think what was fun in reading the teaching and storytelling part was just that it says, again, ChatGPT, she is a gifted teacher and storyteller who inspires, equips, and engages others through creative and immersive experiences. No real surprises there. Whether in the classroom, across cultures, or through written and spoken word, she leads with imagination, clarity, and heart, using narrative and atmosphere to make truth memorable and transformative. I just felt like that was so all-encompassing and actually describes more of who I really am. That storytelling and teaching are not limited to the classroom or here and there, but I can bring that into even creating a podcast, for example.
Right.
When I'm doing the production side of it, it is still creative and storytelling.
Mm-hmm. And what I heard when you read that was your voice elevated your esteem. In other words, as Chat GPT, this supposedly independent thing, told you what you were good at, it all of a sudden brought that up on a pedestal and says, this is important to people. And it said it to you, where I know you well enough to know that you don't think that way often about what you give to other people. And the truth is, those are really valuable things. And sometimes when we read those things of what we are, we need to let that absorb into us. You believe in an enemy, right? We believe that there's God that gives us strength, and then there's Satan that kind of tries to deprive us of the ego and the strength and the power that we have for others. And if I can share this, the enemy is often whispering in your ear, you're not good enough, or you're not worthy, or you're not valuable. Is that true?
Yes, I have grown a lot to where that voice is not as strong. But even reading this now, I realize that voice maybe is more there than I thought, because this doesn't sound totally like me.
Right. Because the enemy wants it to say, there's two things that are working here, right? Is we also are taught to be humble, right?
Yeah.
And when we're looking at life calling, it's not the time to be humble. It's the time to say, I am good at this. But then also when you say, what difference will this make in my life? If you really at your core don't believe what other people are telling you, what an independent ChatGPT is telling you, what this testing is telling you, you will not be able to manifest that in your life nearly as well. And do you agree that a lot of women have this? I'm not saying only women, men have this too, but a lot of women have this inability to really celebrate themselves and who they are and what their strengths are.
I know you've noticed it more in women. As a teacher, I've noticed it in, unfortunately, males and females. Just in students, I think a lot of them suffer from low self-esteem. And so as a teacher, that was one of my favorite things, is telling them, you have this strength. I want to build that up in you and tell you that you're an awesome person, and here's exactly why, and here's what you can do with that in your life. But I was criticized, let's put it that way, a lot in my childhood, so that I had a low view of myself. And so I think that opened doors for the enemy to just beat me up mentally throughout my life. And so overcoming that has been a long journey. And that means that actual therapy and coaches and mentors. I mean, I've had a lot of positive input in my life to overcome that. But every once in a while, I read something like this and say, that is not me. That sounds way too good to be me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is very simplistic, but most people know what Star Wars is, right? And Luke has to believe that the Force is with him for the Force to be with him, right? We have to believe that we've been given really valuable tools for those tools to be effective. But at the same time, there's a dark side, right? And Darth, or whoever you want to say is on the dark side, is trying to keep people in check. And the most in check people are the people that don't believe that they have value to bring, right? And so when we are living with the Force, or we're living with a fulfilled self-esteem, or when, in our language, when we're living with God's view of ourselves, we're able to fulfill our calling much more than when we're letting Darth or whatever keep us in this dark place, right?
I feel really convicted about this when I read this, because if number one observation that I should be part of my calling is my spiritual depth, I need to really be open to saying that is okay, that's me, that's who I am, and share that and not hide it.
Yeah. And why would you hide it?
Because it sounds proud, I think.
And in certain Christian communities, pride is really the enemy. A legitimate enemy, right? But also a false enemy sometimes, right? The legitimate enemy is there are arrogant people, right? But the false enemy says, if I can tell her, never mention that you bring value to people, then your soul doesn't believe it. And some of us were raised in a culture, a family culture, that says, don't ever say anything good about yourself, right? Even today, when I write the score or the pickleball scores, I always write mine last. It's just in my imprint, right? And there's beauty in humility, right? But there's also a squelchingness if that humility is just because the culture says I need to be humble, even when I really have this to offer. So let's go on to life calling statements, right? It came up with 6 for you. And what we like about ChatGPT is we ask it to over-explain things so we can pick and choose, right? We don't want you to have 6 life callings. But it's kind of said, well, I think this could be your life calling, or this could be your life calling, and this. And sometimes one of these life calling statements might be true, and then 20 years later or 5 years later, it's not true, and it's more of this. Of these, which one or two really jumped out at you as saying, okay, this I think is kind of what it is?
Okay, you're not going to be surprised by this, but I condensed them and rewrote them.
And this is what we want people to do, because GPT gives us 6. We don't want you to have 6. But you'll like the way it phrases one, and you'll like the way it phrases the second half of another, or it captures a sentiment. And so we want you to condense and to edit and to transform it into your own.
One is, I am called to awaken spiritual authenticity in others through intimate relationships, compassionate, gentle coaching, and mentoring that nurtures identity, healing, and growth.
Okay, good. So you had 3 things in there. So let's break those down a little bit. What was the first one?
I'm called to awaken spiritual authenticity in others.
So there's some big words in there, right? Awaken is the first word. What do you mean by that? What's the essence of awaken for you?
I'm just thinking of examples, again, mostly in the classroom, when I would see something, a gift in somebody, for example, I would hone in on that and stir it up and shake it and say, you have this gift.
This is kind of what we're doing in our life calling coaching, right?
Sure.
We're awakening, we're pointing out, we're saying, look at this. This is who you are. Bom, 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 bom. And, hopefully by the time we're done with 6 sessions with somebody, they somewhat believe it, right? And sometimes it takes that, right? And sometimes it doesn't. But awakening is a big one.
I really like that word, actually.
Right.
It was kind of surprising.
I do too. And probably wouldn't have been a word that you would have chosen, but we gave you 6 choices, and probably it was in one of those statements.
I'm called to awaken people. That's kind of huge.
Yes. and it's different than notifying people or informing people. That's so bland, right? But awakening. And life calling statements should have energizing words, right? Words that have deeper meanings than just what's right on the surface. What was the next part? Awakening?
Awakening spiritual authenticity.
Whew, okay.
I know.
So what is that?
I think my life story is so much about not being fake in your spiritual life, in your relationship with God.
So you've gone through some hard times, right? That you've broken some spiritual norms, right? You went through a divorce, as did I, right? That's pretty crushing when you've grown up in a church, right?
Sure.
So how did that awaken authenticity in you?
I hate to admit this, but before I went through a divorce myself, I was very anti-divorce for any reason. I just thought it was a sin, and how dare anybody do that. I think God really
put them in a little box that says, I don't think that they're really got it figured out, right?
It was very, very humbling to realize I'm in a really bad marriage and I actually have to get a divorce. I could never imagine that I would have to do that.
Authenticity and humility are kind of partners, right? You don't really have authenticity until you have humility. Because if I'm not humble enough, I'm not going to tell you about the bad part.
I think vulnerability is the same kind of field there, because that divorce and just having to admit that I've gone through a divorce, that I was emotionally beaten up for 6 years in a marriage, it's just cringeworthy. I just hate to admit that I went through that. But at the same time, I'm glad I did, because otherwise I'd still be super judgmental of people who get divorced.
And you and I both have had a number of people that have gone through divorce, and we try to say fairly quickly, we've been there, no judgment from us, right?
Yeah.
And that's really helpful for some of those people to know we're not trying to pretend like we're something we're not. We are like you.
I even judged women in abusive situations, looking on the outside, saying, why don't they just leave? How stupid can they be?
And it took you 7 years?
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
Leaving 7 times, though, which is the average. 7th
There you
time,
go.
I finally got out, and it's like, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Women, well, not women, just women, but people cannot just get out of abusive marriages like that. It's not possible.
Sometimes it's because the Christian culture, you don't feel could handle that kind of authenticity, right?
Sure.
Yep.
So it's made me who I am, and my ability to awaken that spiritual depth in others now.
Yeah.
Authenticity in others through intimate relationships.
Intimate relationships. Intimate can take a whole different meaning, right? But the meaning that you have is deep.
Not surface.
Right, deep. And what is true of you in a conversation with somebody that you're trying to get to know intimately? What are you trying to do?
Well, first of all, I just ask questions.
You're looking for the things that they're emotional about, right? That's where their intimacy is.
I don't know if I put it in those words,
right.
But I think it's true.
That's what you're fishing for, is what are the things that they get really excited about? What are the things that they've been hurt by? Because that gets to the core of their authentic person, right? Good. What was the next part of that?
Through compassion and gentle coaching and mentoring that nurtures identity, healing, and growth.
What's the difference? So you say mentoring and coaching. I mentor and coach, and you mentor and coach. What's the difference in the style? If somebody was going to coach with you and somebody was going to coach with me, they'd get a different feel. What's the difference between you and I?
Well, mine's going to change as I use your formula more, in your questions, but I often will more, I don't want to say that I'm more prayerful than you, but
you are probably.
When I'm coaching somebody behind the scenes before we're in a session, I am praying and I think listening to God and getting ideas of questions to ask and how to pray for them and what insights to give them.
And you're leading with questions 80 to 90% of the time, right?
Correct.
And I lead with questions about 70% of the time. And then what do I do?
You dig in and say, what are you doing about that?
I make declarations that they have already told me, but it wasn't as clear.
You give them those aha statements, and I usually wait for a client to come up with it themselves, which actually takes longer. I'm not even a patient person, as you know, but in this situation, I'm waiting for them to get to that answer.
Right. Even in this, I've done that for you, right? I've kind of said, now you are this kind of person, and why did you, and I'm declaring at the end of our coaching, where you're still trying to get them to discover, right? Because discovery for them, that's the real bonus, right? That's where real learning takes place, is when they discover things about themselves. Yeah. I'm gonna force things
a little bit farther.
Yes.
Faster.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know their brain is already going there, but at the same time, you're going to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more caring in your coaching approach, and then you're going to celebrate more authentically with them, probably. Yeah, I'm going to say, boy, that was a real win, and they're not going to see it on my face, and they're not going to feel it. They don't think I got the champagne out, even though I probably did in my mind, but they're going to see it and feel it from you, right? When you're excited about how they've made some progress or made a discovery or whatever.
Yeah.
All right.
And the second one?
Yeah.
I am called to teach, inspire, and guide others through quiet influence, creative storytelling, relational mentorship, and the cultivation of safe, flexible spaces where faith, imagination, and transformation flourish. It's too much of a
It's way too long.
Yeah.
But there are several things in there that are really good, right? What are the things? Give me 2 or 3 of them that you...
I think inspire and guide stood out to me because I don't think of myself as a super inspirational person, like an otter personality, but I get inspired by things really easily. And so when I see something in a person that's inspiring and awesome, I just rejoice in that.
Yeah. Good.
I thought it was funny. well, not funny, but interesting that it says through quiet influence. I think a lot of what I do is behind the scenes, so I don't think of it as that important, but it kind of elevated me a little bit that what I do quietly is good.
When you first started coaching, I remember you would come and you would tell me that these ladies were discovering that your coaching process has moved them. And you said, but all I did was ask them questions, right? But they were making real progress steps in their life. And that's what I think is that quiet influence, right? I'm praying for you. How did you do in this area? Just the fact that somebody's going to ask, how did I do in an area that we talk specifically about, is a quiet influence. That is telling people, I care. And sometimes that's all we need, is to have one other person care that that we are making progress. And all of a sudden we'll kind of say, oh, somebody cares, I better make progress in this week.
I think it just is funny for me to read the words that inspire and influence, because I just
You
don't
see yourself as a motivational speaker, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not an influencer. I'm not an inspiring person.
And that's why I use the word quiet. Right.
And that makes me feel like, okay, I can handle that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it elevates those sessions that you have that feel, okay, we made one more step. It's a quiet progress towards that person's, ultimate life calling. And it's significant.
I think also cultivation of safe, flexible spaces for transformation.
This is where it got a little bit wordy, but yes.
To flourish, I'm really surprised that people open up to me sometimes. I think it's because I listen, and not too many people are listening to other people, and that they see me as a safe person is honoring to me, I guess.
So we need to answer the question, my unique story tells me.
I don't want to do this.
Okay, here, let me help you. My unique story tells me that I have a quiet influence.
This is hard for me
through
to say.
Teaching and inspirational words. Now that's just a sample, right? What you want to do is you want to say, what are the things that your story screams out at you, and you want to be able to synthesize that into ideally less than 8 words, because less than 8 words is fairly memorable. Okay? So my unique story, and then that's an assignment for next week. You should be able to fill that in with an 8-word statement. My unique story tells me that I influence and inspire people through my writing, my quiet mentoring, and something like that. That makes sense?
Yeah, I can't just say I'm called to help others fulfill their calling.
That's your calling. So your unique story is just one part of your calling. Okay? And it brings up the elements that your story tells you are really important. We're going to put together your calling, and there'll be parts of it that are redundant, right? Because your calling, or your story and your personality and your skills are going to start screaming, wow, this is who you are. So, but we just want to get what your story tells you, not what it tells you to do, but what it tells you is about your life calling. It tells me that my life calling should, and it needs to be something that you feel comfortable with. It's going to use some of those same words and it's not your life calling statement, right? It's just what your story tells you. But realize that these ChatGPT got your life statement, or your life calling statements out of that. But we're going to continue to mold your life calling statement through this process. Yep. Any questions?
You've done this with other clients, and how are they doing?
Yeah, so I take a different tack with almost every client. And yours was the other two gentlemen that I'm coaching right now are gentlemen, first of all. And so it wasn't as much of is this true? Can you really absorb this emotionally? It was, this is true, isn't it? And the difference between ladies and guys is guys are overconfident
Sometimes.
most of the time, at least in their statements, and women are underconfident, at least in their statements, often. And so I spent more time really helping you realize that what it's saying is true, right? Now your job is to believe it deeply, right? That's the trick, right? That's where the emotion is for you right now, right? Is, can I really believe this deeply?
I'm really glad this is almost over because this has been kind of excruciating for me.
And that's the other difference is, right, in coaching this, I don't think I've said anything to hurt you, but what you have felt deeply about this process is it's revealing what I know is true, but I have a hard time believing, right? And that's the juxtaposition that you're in is, I know this is true, I want to believe it, and I want to live it. And
I don't want to waste my life anymore not fulfilling my calling just because something's holding me back from that emotional.
And the warning is, we're never going to get rid of everything that's holding it back, but we can, when we can start to recognize what's holding it back, then we can say that's legitimate that it's holding me back, or that's not legitimate. And I think what you're saying is many of the emotions that I feel are not, I don't feel are legitimately, they don't shouldn't have a hold on me. They shouldn't be able to hold me back.
Yeah. So I thank you for this. It was not what I expected, actually.
Right.
It's better than I expected, but harder.
And
so it's not like a therapy session.
Really helpful for some people who this will the low ability to accept the strength and the abilities that you have is going to be something that a lot of people relate to. So just not the two guys that I'm working with right now. So,
but I know that there are men that also struggle with self-esteem, so it's not like you couldn't coach them
run
as well.
into the same. Yeah. And that's that's the interesting thing about coaching is we try to identify what are the barriers, right? What is going to help you or what is going to hinder you from really being able to realize this. And all we're trying to do is identify who you are, right? And in your case, we need to identify it, and then we need you to believe it to the deepest part of your soul.
It's just interesting because when we coach people, we're focusing on positives, but those positives are sometimes so hard to accept that it becomes
for some people.
Emotional for some people.
Yeah, right. And again, everything plays into it. Your family background is part of your unique story. Your spiritual and religious, which has mainly been good from your perspective, but also hindering sometimes. And all of that plays into it. And if that was a really deep wounds, I'd say I think a therapist is really,
which
important.
I definitely had.
Yeah. And if they're wounds that are healed but now need to be realized, then that's a coach, but also a friend. In other words, the friend is always there alongside of you. And so those people become somewhat of your cheerleaders but it's also what becomes very vulnerable is once you figure out your life calling is to state that with confidence to people, right?
I think
Well,
that will be hard.
you've been a great example to me about saying, let's stop saying that we breed and train Labrador retrievers first. Let's just say we coach people in terms of discovering their life calling. Well, that's a little bit harder for me because I'm not, there's nothing in my track record that says life coach as a job description, right? I've been doing it all my life to some extent, but nothing in my track record says this is your official calling. So now this has become somewhat of a self-proclaimed calling, right? It is my calling. I know that. And I knew it when I was doing it 25, 30 years ago. But at the same time, to say to people, this is now on my business card is a little bit, okay, that's a little, you've taken that step and I'm starting to take that step. So
one thing I want to say though is about my mom. She is a mentor, like a spiritual mother to other women.
Right.
So even though not to me, I just want to make that clear. She's an awesome woman and she's a great friend. She's more of a friend to me.
She's more of a mom to you.
Yeah, she's more of a mom to me.
Which there's nothing wrong with
nothing
that
wrong with
because
that.
she knocks it out of the park in that category. But it's probably much more rare that your mentor is going to be a close relative. I'm coaching you for the sake of you going through the process and that. But I'm probably not the best positioned coach for you long term, right? We've been trying to coach our son, and we're realizing we're probably not the best positioned person to coach them. Doesn't mean that they don't need coaching. It just means sometimes you've got to pick somebody who has a little bit of objectivity, a little less history, a little, so that's all good.
I also just want to say I'm so happy to be married to you. Thank you, because you have been someone who's encouraged me and helped me heal through this whole marriage of almost 18 years now.
Yeah. And it's been fun. We have people that are close to us that have seen you change.
Yeah.
And I like to take
You like to take some credit for that.
Take a little bit of credit for that.
You can.
Because if people have, this is one thing that we need to learn when we're being life coached. If you're hearing voices that are encouraging, it's much easier to step forward and to believe things. If you're hearing voices that are discouraging, you have to limit how much those people are allowed to be in your stands, right? If you had a dad that was constantly berating you when you were doing any sort of sport, nobody would feel good, right? Even if they're saying the truth, but they're saying it harshly. So sometimes we have people in our life that we need to say, that voice doesn't deserve to be in my stands very much.
And that's where you as a coach, I as a coach, we can feel more open and able to speak directly to a person and say, some of the people in your life shouldn't be there speaking to you. They're bringing you down.
Yep. You can almost meet people and know, wow, they've got more negative voices in their life than they have positive voices. And that's hard. They probably need therapy as well as coaching for that. Yes.
But thank you for being a really positive, you're a cheerleader for me. So thank you.
Well, it concludes our time knowing your best life and a unique chance to get to know Julie a little bit better. So thank you for being open. All right, you did good, Spark.
We want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Today's episode of Your Best Life was brought to you by True North Quests, helping you discover your calling so you can live a life filled with purpose. Find out more at tnadventures.org, where you can book an appointment with a calling coach, learn about upcoming True North Quest workshops, and more. And by Marble Mountain Kennels, where exceptional Labrador retrievers are bred and trained for adventure, companionship, and service. Visit mmkennels.com to meet your new best canine friend. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, remember your best life starts with knowing your calling and finding your true north.